Thank you everyone for joining us. Our next session is filing taxes while undocumented, and there is a Q&A session. For those of you that submitted questions, we have given them to Brian as well. So I'm going to let you, Brian, go ahead and take the Zoom floor.
Cool. Thank you, Maria. Thank you everyone for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so that's up. So again, everyone, I'm Brian Soto. I'm a CPA at Soto Accounting. Today, we're going to be discussing taxes as it relates to DACA, ITIN, and entrepreneurship. So we'll begin with a scenario that might be very relatable here. So we have a student here. Her name's Maria. She's 21 years old. She's undocumented. She's a junior in college. Aspiring graphic designer, and she creates flyers and websites for her friends and a local small business. So, once Maria graduates from college, she has three options. She could continue college through graduate school, she could enter the workforce, or she could start a business or a side hustle. And before she pursues any of those three, it's best, since she's undocumented, to pursue or acquire an ITIN. So what is an ITIN? Nearly everyone in the US who doesn't have a Social Security or DACA is eligible for an ITIN. ITINs are for federal tax reporting purposes only. It allows that individual to comply with US tax laws, regardless of their immigration status. And simply put, the IRS just wants people to pay their fair share of taxes. So some quick ITIN facts. The IRS does not share your tax information with the Department of Homeland Security. It's actually against the U.S. Privacy Act for the IRS to share personal tax information. The IRS does not enforce immigration laws. If they did, they would actually receive less tax returns filings from undocumented individuals, which obviously would lead to less tax revenue. And millions of undocumented individuals are already filing and paying U.S. taxes. Additionally, filing tax is a good way to document compliance and residency for undocumented individuals, especially if they're on the path towards citizenship. And in some cases, it may even result in a refund of tax paid by that undocumented individual, even if he or she is using an invalid Social Security number. And just to reinforce that last line, this is a direct quote from the Chief of Counsel at the IRS. So long as the individual uses his or her ITIN to properly report the wages that are reflected on the Form W-2 and pay the tax associated with that income, the individual has not violated the Internal Revenue laws. What this is saying is that if an individual is working under a fake or a different Social Security number, they should still report that W-2 because those are wages earned by them. But file it with an ITIN to reflect that properly on the tax returns. So how do you apply for an ITIN? First, you'll go to an ITIN certifying acceptance agent. My firm is one of those. We do ITIN processing. Part of that process, you would want either a valid passport from that country of origin. If a passport is not available, then you'll need two other pieces of documentation from this list. The most common other documentations that is used is the green card and a birth certificate to prove foreign status and identity. So why is the ITIN important in these three different scenarios for Maria, right? So let's assume that she wants to continue in graduate school. And if her counterpart had a Social Security or DACA, then the parents may need an ITIN for tax purposes, specifically for when they apply for FAFSA. In the case of Maria, she has no Social Security or DACA, so then she may acquire an ITIN for tax purposes and to apply for certain private scholarships. Let's say Maria wants to enter the workforce. She's unfortunately not able to without a Social Security or DACA. If she did have Social Security or DACA, then that's obvious that she could work as an employee on payroll. Since she doesn't, she would need an ITIN to work as an independent contractor. Now, for Maria, she's more interested in entrepreneurship. If she did have a Social Security or DACA, then she could obviously pursue entrepreneurship and form a business. But if she doesn't, in the case that for Maria, she does not have a Social Security and DACA, she could still start a business by acquiring an ITIN and then forming that LLC, that business with that ITIN. So let's focus on that entrepreneurship slash side hustle and what that would look like. So, given the scenario, an undocumented individual comes here with very little funds or resources to even start a business. That's where the bootstrapping methodology comes into play. Bootstrapping is simply starting a business with limited to no funds or resources. So for Maria, she would take these 5 steps, right? If we bootstrap Maria's business, she would start with ideation and research, basically defining her service and product. She designs flyers for social media and websites. She's testing templates and refining her skill. And she realizes, you know what, I want to pursue graphic design. She then starts thinking through her business model. How does the business make money? So she creates design packages for social media content. She creates design packages for websites and other things. Now she has a business model. She has design packages that a customer can hire her for. So then the next step is creating her MVP, her minimal viable product, so that she could acquire that first customer and start generating income. So she does this by showcasing her portfolio work online, whether through it's a website or Instagram. She creates a quick little social media campaign to generate leads. And then she starts generating those leads, and those leads turn into customers purchasing the design packages online. Now that she's generated income, she now uses those profits to do step 4, where it's the business formation or formalizing the business, right? So she acquires an LLC and an EIN. She goes on to open a business bank account, and all the business income and expenses come out of that business bank account. From there, she's now ready to scale and grow. She acquires more customers, expands her service offerings, and potentially hires labor. And all this as an ITIN, as an undocumented individual that acquires an ITIN and has started an LLC and a business from basically nothing, right? She came here with nothing. So now that we've gone through those pieces, let's talk through some specific scenarios. So scenario 1, undocumented parents with dependents in college. I've seen this done wrong many times. They either don't file for years, or each parent files a head of household separately, claiming separate dependents. This leads to issues down the road and leads to amendments, which is costly. The right way that those parents should handle their taxes is that they acquire ITINs, file as married filing jointly, and claim those dependents so those students can use the tax returns for FAFSA and other funding opportunities. Scenario 2, undocumented individual working for cash. So this more in line with Maria's situation. The wrong way to do is that she doesn't file any taxes for years. The right way is to acquire an ITIN, or if she's DACA, she has the Social Security. She could file a Schedule C, claiming her earnings, but also claim the related expenses, right? So as a graphic designer, she'll be able to claim expenses such as mileage, software, computer equipment, phone, etc. And because she's able to take those expenses against her income, she may end up paying less in tax than her Social Security counterpart. And then from there, as mentioned, she could even form her LLC to formalize her business. Scenario 3, undocumented individual working under someone else's Social Security. The wrong way to handle this is, again, that individual does not file for years. The right way is to acquire an ITIN, file a tax return claiming the W-2 that was issued to them, even if they're using someone else's or a fake social. They would file with their real name, apply for an ITIN with that, enter the W-2 as is, and they may even be eligible for a refund if they overpaid in those withheld taxes on the W-2. At the end of the day, as mentioned, IRS just wants every individual that works to pay their fair share of taxes, whether they're working under someone else's Social Security or their own. So the main takeaways from all this: filing shows compliance and helps that individual's path towards citizenship. Even with the fake Social Security, undocumented individuals should still file and claim the W-2 income. ITIN or DACA individuals can form an LLC and work under a business name and EIN. And then the bootstrapping method comes in handy for creating a business from nothing or limited resources. With that, This is my information. Feel free to pass it on. I'm going to move into the Q&A. Maria did send over some questions that were already submitted, so I'll discuss and review those questions now. So one question was, how do taxes work? How does one fill them out and process them? You're taxed on your earned income, W-2 and 1099s and business profits. One way to file is obviously with some tax software out of the box, TurboTax, H&R Block. The other way is to hire a professional tax preparer. You always want to go to either an enrolled agent, a CPA, or a tax attorney. This is obviously recommended for businesses and undocumented individuals, especially those that are working under a fake Social Security and have a W-2. They will not be able to file their taxes through a tax software such as TurboTax and H&R Block because they'll get an error since they're using a W-2 that's not associated with their ITIN. On top of that, to apply for an ITIN, you still need to go to one of these professional tax preparers to fill out that W-7 application. So how does an undocumented individual file for the ITIN number? How might it be used for filing taxes? As mentioned, file with the certified ITIN acceptance agent, and that goes along with your return. So one of the new rules that they implemented for ITIN is you have to submit your ITIN application, which is the Form W-7, alongside a tax return. No longer can you just submit an ITIN application by itself. It has to be attached to a tax return. The next question was, if someone works with a fake Social Security number but wants to get an ITIN number, should they do a Schedule C or black out a W-2 Social Security number? As mentioned before, don't do neither of these, right? You're not gonna file Schedule C or black out that W-2 Social Security. You file the ITIN application, the Form W-7, with that W-2 showing whatever Social Security that it was associated with. So you don't file a Schedule C, do not black out the W-2 Social Security number. You'll claim those wages and the tax withheld on the tax return as normal. And again, this may lead to a refund. Some more questions here. How should undocumented students prepare to pay taxes if they receive scholarships, fellowships, internships, stipends? Scholarships and fellowships are not taxable as long as you're pursuing a degree and the funds are used for qualified educational expenses. Those educational expenses include tuition, fees, books, supplies. It does not include room and board. The stipends are taxable. They're subject to ordinary tax rates, but they're not subject to the self-employment tax, which is an additional 15%. So a rule of thumb, when any of these students are receiving stipends, they should be setting aside 15 to 20% of that stipends for ordinary tax. And then last question was, what CPA services and student support resources or referrals do you have for undocumented students? First thing, obviously, I'm not an attorney. Legal is not my wheelhouse. So we always work closely with other lawyers, specifically this one, the Chicago Law and Education Foundation. Alexandra Caro is one we've worked with before. We refer any of our DACA or undocumented individuals that have legal questions to this organization. Additionally, we have some ITIN handouts and frequently asked questions materials that I'll pass on to Maria so she could distribute. And then lastly, for anybody on this call or any students at Dominican University, mention Dominican University when you call us for an ITIN application. We'll do that ITIN application for free. And that's that Form W-7. And we usually charge $300, but for that Dominican University students, we're offering that application for free. So with that, I'll open it to the floor for any other questions. If you guys want me to go back to any of these slides, I know it kind of went by fast, but I'm happy to go back and just explain through a little bit more any of the slides that I went through. No questions.
Brian, I have kind of a question. I know one of our previous presenters said that, kind of getting an ITIN was kind of a scary process, worried about the government that somehow it was a trap, or it wasn't going to be safe, you know, to file an ITIN. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, one of my slides, I'll go back to it. You know, the IRS is not, you know, they don't work for the Homeland Security. They don't enforce immigration laws. The IRS is simply there to collect tax revenue. That's their purpose. So I know a lot of times, and it's basically a myth that filing taxes as an undocumented individual might lead to issues down the road, especially if they're working under a fake Social Security. So that's why I emphasize, even if you're, and we've done it before where we file W-2s that have, you know, Social Securities that are not theirs, but by filing that W-2 and then acquiring an ITIN, you're actually showing, you know, the IRS, and even if they're going through that citizens process, that individual, they're showing a path towards citizenship. They're showing that they want to be a citizen. So they're complying with the tax laws. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that these individuals are here in the US and that they comply with the tax laws. Because then when they go through their citizenship process, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but this is what I've gathered, is that when they go through that citizenship process, if they're collecting under a fake social and not filing taxes, it could lead to other issues down the road. So by filing taxes, you're actually showing, and you're actually showing, you know, the government that you want to be a citizen and you're complying with all the rules that are applied to them. Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for being here with us. So I actually have a question for you too, from a student that can't be here, but she'll be watching the recording. But her question was, what happens, and you may or may not have the answer to this question, but her question was, what happens if a student has DACA, or, you know, a temporary work authorization, you know, temporary work authorization, but then they lose it, right? Like their DACA expires or TPS expires or something along those lines. How, you know, is it in their best interest to sort of keep the job, tell their employer, continue filing taxes? You know, what's sort of your recommendation in that sense?
Yeah, ooh, that's a good question. I think that's more on the legal side. If their DACA expired, that means their Social Security might be expired. Yeah, I don't have a clear-cut answer for that. I mean, from a legal standpoint, if they say, yeah, they can't use that Social Security anymore and they're officially undocumented, then the next option is to acquire an ITIN and apply for an ITIN. Again, I don't know how that potentially affects their DACA application or a citizen, you know, someone that's on the path toward citizenship. But again, like the whole point of the IRS and taxes is that they pay their fair share. So the whole point is that they file a tax return if they earned income in that year. If they didn't earn income, then they don't have to file anything. But if they did, then we would have the discussion of, okay, do we file with that DACA Social Security? If we can't, from the legal standpoint, if we can't use that Social Security anymore, then we would apply for an ITIN and submit taxes that way, just so that they remain compliant with the U.S. tax laws.
Thank you for that. And then one other question that I'm just curious about is, so you mentioned, you know, that you've supported other undocumented folks, and when they're filing for their, like they have their own private businesses. So I'm wondering, what are some examples, right? Some things that you've seen other than, we did have a presenter earlier who talked about his graphic design business. So I'm just wondering, like, curious, what are some other businesses that you've seen?
Yeah, construction, trucking is a more common one. I see a lot of truckers, you know, starting their own business, undocumented. We get them an ITIN. From there, we get them the LLC and the EIN form, and they start practicing with their LLC name and their EIN, and no one knows the difference. They're allowed to do that and generate the income and pay their taxes. And again, as long as they're paying their taxes, they're reporting everything clearly. You know, that's the best scenario for someone that's came here with nothing and can't necessarily be an employee for someone or be on a payroll. Acquire an ITIN. They're already probably, they're doing, you know, food stands are another thing. Selling little little trinkets, you know, at pop-ups is another thing. You know, just being compliant by getting your ITIN, taking that a step further, formalizing your LLC if you're doing it full time. Those are a lot of, currently what I've seen a lot. And, once we get them formed, they just feel way more comfortable running their business because now they're not scared of doing something wrong. They're compliant with everything. So it's really encouraging for them and very relieving for them to be able to do that through our firm.
Brian, we have a question here. It says, so we have a student who applied for an ITIN while filing their 2020 tax return. The return was never processed, and as far as they know, the ITIN was not granted. They have been unable to reach the IRS for an update. What do you recommend as far as the process?
Oh man, that's a tough one because it's a common theme, especially after COVID, that the IRS is severely backed up. ITIN processing, we have noticed that it's gone from like a 2 to 4 month process to now like 6 to 8 months. I had one case that took 12 months. I would say, a recommendation would be to call the IRS, try to get a hold of someone, understand where their application is in line, and then see if there's any additional documentation that the IRS is pending. A lot of times we've just gotten from the IRS that, they just need additional time. So that's the unfortunate part that I wish I had a stronger answer to, but that it's really just kind of waiting. If they already had an ITIN and they're just simply renewing, I would continue using that ITIN as if it were renewed. If they apply for a new ITIN and they have no number whatsoever, I would still encourage them to continue with whatever they're doing, work-wise, with the understanding that that ITIN, more likely than not, that ITIN will be approved, assuming that the application was filled out correctly. I haven't run into any ITIN applications that were rejected, assuming that they were all filed properly with the right documentation. So yeah, so to answer your question, it's really, call the IRS as much as you can, get updates, and just be on top of them and make sure that all your documentation is in. And then I guess give them time, just because they are behind not only on ITIN applications, but refunds for some individuals are still pending.
So there's a follow-up question. So should they wait to file their return for 2021?
That's a good question. They should see a professional. So if they would come to me, I would talk through their scenario, see what their 2020 was. We would prepare their 2021 and paper file it with a designation that they've already applied for an ITIN. So they could still file for 2021. They would just be a paper filing process, and we would mark that the ITIN application was submitted and that we're still waiting for an ITIN.
Thank you. So for independent contractors, what is the percentage that you recommend be put aside for when it's tax season? They are not caught by, so that they're not caught by surprise. Would they put 15 to 20% aside?
Yes, that is the general rule of thumb that I give, is around 20% put aside. Again, you're only taxed on the net profit, right? So if you're an independent contractor earning all this income, you now have the ability to offset that income with expenses, and then only the net profit remaining is what gets taxed. So although they'll set aside 20% of their gross income, more likely than not, after expenses, it may be less than that. So 20% is on the higher end, assuming that they're not, a high grossing individual. And by high grossing, I mean like 200K or more. So yeah, so that is the rule of thumb, 15 to 20% put aside of the gross income.
Next, if parents incorrectly file taxes using a fake Social Security instead of their ITIN, would it look suspicious for them to file an amended tax document with their ITIN, or would it be recommended Or what would be recommended in that situation?
Definitely amend. Again, IRS, you just want to show that you're compliant. So if it turns out that you have to amend, definitely amend it, get it rectified, because the last thing you want is a notice in the mail saying, hey, we fixed it for you and we're estimating that you owe X amount of tax. And it happens all the time, but IRS is always sending out automated notices. They sound scary. It even mentions, tax liens and seizing of assets. It's better to stay ahead of your tax returns, because the IRS does have up to 7 years to look back at your tax returns and review or audit them. So always, if you know that you acquired an ITIN and you have to update your taxes from a prior year with that ITIN to claim certain income, do it ahead of time so that it doesn't catch you off guard, years down the road. So I would recommend not doing anything, but staying ahead of it and amending that tax return.
I have another question. It says, so when I'm filing taxes, do I have to include my school refund check in there?
School refund check, like the excess of probably their scholarship money or grant money. Yes, technically, yes, unless it was used for educational expenses. So tuition, supplies, fees. If it was just pocketed and used for, room and board or personal expenses, then technically, yes, they should report that as other income on their tax return.
And then I was denied an ITIN number because they said I was eligible for a Social Security, but my DACA is still pending to be processed. What can I do?
The DACA, if it's being renewed, I would use that same social. Again, this might be on the legal side, but I would use that same DACA number, because we're under the assumption that the renewal would go through. So you still want to remain compliant by using that number. If they, I guess that would really be the only option, because if they denied the ITIN, then their only other option is to report or apply using that DACA Social Security, or similar to the other question is file paper, file the tax returns paper file, and put a note there that we submitted DACA renewal and that's still pending.
Do you help parents amend their taxes if they filed incorrectly? And is it preventing their child from accessing FAFSA funds? How much does it typically cost?
Yes, I see this all the time. This is probably the most common mistake that individuals or parents are doing. They'll file separately, head of household. One parent claims one dependent, the other parent claims the other dependent. Although they all live under the one roof, it is incorrect. The reason why they do is because it does lead to a larger refund. But once that child goes to college and they're filling out that FAFSA application, there's contradictory information, because now they're claiming that the parents are married, but the tax returns say something else. So yeah, we do amend those tax returns to reflect the proper status. Usually, since the wrong way led to a larger refund, we have to amend, correct it, and that actually results in money that they have to pay back. So it's one of my least favorite things to do, but you have to do it so that the FAFSA all makes sense and they're eligible for the FAFSA. But yeah, our amendments start at $250 and up, depending on complexity. So it's very costly for them. Again, although they'll get a larger refund up front, a year or two later when that student goes to college, it's going to cost them way more than that.
How can other schools partner with your firm to support with filing of ITIN applications?
Yeah, reach out to me. Like I said, anybody that mentions Dominican University, I'm happy to do their ITIN application for free. I'm a big advocate for undocumented individuals. If there's any other schools, shoot me a message and we'll talk through that. If there's any presentations that need to be done ahead of time, or if you simply just want that free service for your students, message me and we'll talk through that.
Any other questions from anyone that's here?
I'll just say that was really, really helpful. I know I learned a lot in this session. So thank you, Brian. That was really helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. And taxes are very specific to individuals. Every individual has a different scenario. So if there's any other scenarios that pop up as you guys are working with your students, just have them call my office. There's always someone Monday through Friday answering calls, and we'll be happy to just talk through the scenario and get that student right.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for joining us today. We really appreciate everything. We all learned a lot from you.